thank you so much for your time. Seriously, it's such a pleasure talking to you.
Are you kidding? Thank you so much for asking me to be here.
Of course, man. I'm sure, in those 22 years since Scary Movie, you've been asked like pretty much all the questions. So what I'm trying today is trying to ask questions that are related to Scary Movie, but also like connected to your career as a filmmaker in a way. So
amazing.
Let's see how it goes.
Sure.
So, but first of all, because I have rewatched Scary Movie just twice actually, just today and yesterday. And I was like, because I feel like nowadays it's become so hard to make, like a good comedy without offending people, because everything has become so digital, everyone has a voice. And I was wondering, what do you believe that, Scary Movie, the way you did it back in 2000 would have been possible today as well?
No. Or I should say not without some sort of trouble somewhere, I would think,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's so, the thing about Scary Movie is it's so unrelenting in its comedy about so much and so many kinds of parts of life that maybe it would get a pass nowadays because it's just the net is so wide, but yeah, hard to say if,
absolutely, right,
they could get away with some of that stuff now,
yes, of course. But what was of course great about the movie was of course that it made so much fun of of course traditional horror movie cliches that you were so annoyed about, because very often you were like, no, again, and I was wondering if that is something that kind of, because you've been such a big part of this movie, is that something that kind of stayed with you, whenever you direct a movie? Do you ever have to travel back because you're like, oh, I feel like we entered cliche territory, let's revisit that scene again?
That's a good question. So I think it's Alfred Hitchcock who says, like, whenever there's a chance for a cliche, flip it on its head. So if it's the moment where the cat is going to jump out from behind a trash can, that we see in so many horror films or whatever it is, that jump scare, find a different way to do it, or don't do it right where it's supposed to happen. So I kind of, I look out for those things when I'm directing projects, most of the time. I mean, sometimes they fit in format with what you're doing, and, they're sort of necessary, right? It becomes sort of like milk toast for the viewers. It's comforting to have that device be where it's supposed to be. But I personally, I would like to try and flip it wherever I can.
Right. So when I watched the movie again, I realized how much stuff, of course, has changed with time. For example, we at the very beginning, we get to see your character Bobby visiting Cindy in her room through the window. And of course, when you and I grew up, you had to actually knock at somebody's door to ask if they can come out and play with you. And nowadays you just text if they can log in and game, but you from your home and I from my home, stuff like that. And I was wondering if there is something specific that you kind of miss about the old ways of connecting and communicating.
Oh man, so much. I mean, it's how I grew up, and I tend to prefer a lot of things that used to work a certain way, to current times. I think like all of it is to make life more convenient, but it also creates, a lot more anxiety when like requests and everything else, notifications and all this stuff is so, so instant and fast and furious, it's sort of, so I sort of long for like the bit of peace that I think used to exist. There used to be like just a second more of peace in between planning and stuff back in the day, and being so accessible now. It's you kind of always have to be ready for whatever is going to come your way. So
Oh yes, absolutely. And one of the things that also changed, of course, is the way how we watch movies in the meantime. I mean, it's so cool, when your character tells us about having watched The Exorcist, the cut version, of course, on TV. And that's what we did, when we grew up. We watched like these horror movies, and the best scenes were out, of course. And also what's no longer available is like the video libraries. We get to see at the beginning of the movie, of course, the characters that make some popcorn. They have rented the movie that they want to see. And I remember, that's something that I miss a little bit, because I was like, whenever you try to rent a movie, sometimes it was so frustrating because you had to wait like 7 to 10 days until it was finally available again. And when you finally had it, it felt so special. And even though you had no idea if it's going to suck or not, but
Right.
knowing that you finally get to see it was so special, and you made
Yeah.
sure that you focus on the movie 100%. And nowadays things have changed a little bit now with all the streaming services, which is also great, but now you can like start watching like 10-15 shows, and after 10 seconds you decide, no, that's crap, that's crap, that's crap. And once you finally decided what to watch, you eventually decide to speed things up and you watch it at a higher speed, because you don't have 2 hours of time but just 90 minutes or whatever.
Right.
So, and I feel like that's a little bit sad. And I was wondering if you feel like that with time, a lot of people have lost their sense of appreciation for the work they are about to see.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does take away from the sort of, special experience that we used to have. I think, I have some nephews that are, teenagers. And, I think like if you're a kid nowadays under 20, with social media and all this stuff, TikTok and, even Snapchat or Vine before that, like, your attention span for storytelling is 15 seconds, 20 seconds. So like I've noticed that a lot of young people I know, they will watch the trailers for movies, and that counts as seeing the movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah, right.
Like they're like, I'm like, oh, this looks good. I want to see that. And they're like, oh yeah, I saw that. And I'm like, you did? How did you see that? Oh, well, I watched a trailer. I'm like, well, that's not seeing the film,
Yes.
Yeah. So that's just sort of mind boggling to me, being 44 years old and remembering, how special of an experience it was to like finally have the movie you're looking for come in, or, look, I mean, now it's even happening with DVDs, right? Like DVDs are kind of on their way out. And, it's like, I used to like, I'm a big cult fan. So like, I used to search for like cult stuff, on DVD just so I could watch it, and yeah. So I think, I think it's a situation where as like a filmmaker, you have to adapt, right? You have to adapt or die, I mean, you can hold strong to your sensibilities, and some filmmakers do, like Chris Nolan, wants his movies to come out, and he makes them for a big screen first, and all that, and I do think of storytelling in film that way as well. But you have to get to a place now where you can tell the same epic story on a screen this size, and keep it interesting, if that's what you're trying to do, but I do still think that there are filmmakers out there, who do sort of design the experience for it being special still, and they maintain that, like, like Wes Anderson is a good example, right? Like I still look forward to his films and I want to see them on a big screen, and, the whole experience is special, and I think that's great too. So.
Absolutely. I just remembered, my brother had, always these huge flat screens, and then, a while ago, he told me that he sold it because now he can watch the movies on his phone and on his tablet. I was like, no, what are you doing to yourself?
I know, man. I know. I need better and better glasses all the time to be able to watch them.
What happened in the background there?
Exactly. You could miss a complete plot detail,
Yeah,
it's I don't know, but for younger people who didn't grow up with that same experience that we did with going to the movies and seeing a movie big, they don't have the reference. And so this
exactly.
is fine. And somehow, they're able to follow narratives, however short they are, this way, or this way.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that, of course, has also changed is the way how some people can annoy you while watching a movie. We know that this ended very, very bad for Brenda in the first movie when she has decided to talk throughout the entire film, which was also something that annoyed me when I grew up. And now a lot of people do no longer talk, but they spend, of course, their time on their phones.
Right.
I was
Right.
wondering, whenever your friends say, "Hey, John, let's have a movie a night, a movie marathon." What are the things that really drive you crazy? What is like a no-go while watching a movie?
I mean, I definitely I've been at screenings of movies I've made, and when you notice people on their phone checking their email, that doesn't feel great. That doesn't feel great. So there's that. And if I'm watching a movie at home, yeah, it's just that, it's I want to give this experience my 100%, and I want the other person or people to do the same. So
Yeah.
I definitely almost take it personally when that happens, and I probably shouldn't, but I mean, again, we're all so accessible at all times, and there's such a and I mean, there's science to back up the endorphins we get from checking and clicking and all that stuff. But so that's that's annoying to me as a filmmaker, and that's annoying to me and as a viewer. It's funny because I don't remember I don't remember it bothering me too much when someone was verbally being disruptive during a movie in a movie theater when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I go to the movies and I notice, I'm sort of hyper aware of oh, that person just turned on their phone, or whatever. It's just So yeah, I went to a screening of The Tragedy of Macbeth recently at a theater, and yeah, and they had ushers there. I mean, it was it hadn't come out yet, so they had ushers there protecting the security of the film, but they also had ushers there, and there was more than a few older people in the audience who maybe didn't know how to use their phone so well, or turn it off or turn it on silent. And I thought it was kind of great. They had ushers there during the movie, policing the use of cell phones, which was kind of great, So
Oh, wow.
maybe
Yeah.
that's what we need. Maybe everybody needs a household, police person to
Oh, yeah.
to make sure everyone's paying attention.
Yes. And I just went through a lot of deleted scenes, and I had forgotten about how many there actually were that didn't make the final cut back then. And sometimes you go oh, okay, I get it why they eventually decided to keep this out. And sometimes you are oh, wow, I wish that was still in the movie. For example, one that comes to mind is with your character, where your character goes yo, me $20 for something specific. And I was wondering, because now since you are a filmmaker yourself, I was wondering if you ever go through your own deleted scenes, wondering whether it really was the right decision to take it out or not.
Oh, I mean, definitely. And I think when you create a movie from soup to nuts, it's hard to kill your babies.
Yeah.
And yeah, you certainly are always going to question that. I mean, you're always going to go oh, part of me wishes I could go back and change this. I mean, that goes on. That's that's the curse of making movies, I think, a little bit is, and if you were completely satisfied with your final product, then something might be wrong with you, I think. I mean, I would question you as an artist, I think, if you didn't, have reservations about choices you made in perpetuity,
Right. And what about being taken seriously as an artist? Because in the film, of course, we can say that in Scream as well, but Doofy is the one that people don't take seriously, which of course is a mistake, as we know at the end of the movie. But let's say at the beginning of his career, he's not taken seriously. And I was wondering if that is ever something that has worried you, knowing that you started off very early. I believe you started shooting kids at the age of 16, I believe.
16, yeah, that's
Right.
right.
And I was
Yeah.
wondering if when you started off, if you were ever worried that people might not take you and your art serious in a way.
Definitely. It was weird because, standing back and looking at it from a different lens, I was a child actor, but, I didn't want to be a child actor. And, it was very important to me that I didn't get pigeonholed into like the child actor kind of projects and stuff like that, which, when I was 16, I looked even younger, and, it could have gone that way. So I was real careful of that and wanted to be specific about what I did, having said that, I have a sense of humor about everything. And, like, whereas some people did and might have scoffed at a movie like Scary Movie in all its, zany parodiness, I didn't. I'm a huge fan of the Wayans brothers, and I always was growing up. And so it was like a dream, it was like Say No More. Of course, I want to do that. So, I do think that like there is a tendency in this business for, whether it's like, I'll just call them the powers that be, there's a tendency to pigeonhole and and fit people into a box that they can market and sell. And I didn't really want that to happen to me, and that may have been to a fault, right? Because I may have worked more and more consistently had I been willing to do that. But my interests were just as much in comedy as they were in dramatic stuff or cult stuff versus this, or independent projects with a human interest voice to big studio comedies.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the scenes that comes up right now is the scene where Cindy gets, of course, the note of the killer who tells her, I know what you did last Halloween. And then, of course, she thinks of something completely else than what the killer originally meant. I was wondering if somebody will tell you right now, hey, John, I know what you did last summer and last Halloween. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
I can't even remember last summer.
Right. For
It's
most people, it's probably
void.
nothing
No.
due to COVID, right?
I know what you did. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I think I fixed up a house in Long Island. So there you go. Yeah.
That's something great.
Yeah. Fixed up a house in Long Island and traveled a bit. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. At least something.
So probably not what the killer would have in mind, right?
No, definitely not.
I didn't hit a guy's boot with my car.
Thankfully.
Thankfully.
One of the scenes that your character Bobby and Cindy recreated from Scream was also seen where they had a discussion about this being a movie and or not being a movie. And of course, Billy Loomis said that everything is movie. We just can't choose the genre. And your character goes like, "Hey, look over there. There's this guy and
that guy."
Yeah. Yeah. And I was wondering, because when we are young, like teenagers, we already kind of create a movie in our head, the movie that kind of tells the future that we wanna kind of live, the future we imagine. And of course, as we become adults, there are so many different voices that change that script in our heads, and we go to directions that we thought we will not go. And I was wondering, what would you say? How different is the movie you are living right now compared to the one you imagined at a very young age in your head?
That's a good question. I think that, funny enough, it's not so different in some ways, because I kind of, I knew that I wanted to be an artist, and I kind of just always, the narrative was always that. But, yes, I do think that like that's the whole idea. But the smaller narratives have changed, along the way, right? It's
Yeah.
like, it's like, what's the expression? If you want to make God laugh, tell it your plans. So, like that would be kind of how I would explain, the change in my narrative throughout life. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I just, I think I knew I was going to be an artist one way or another. And, like that was my dream. My dream wasn't like, let me be world famous and, and this, although, when I was really young, when I was like 11, I was really into horror films. And I really wanted to work in special effects. And so, that was sort of my dream there, right? So like, that's still being an artist, but like, I really thought that was my career path and that's what I was going to do. But,
Right.
here I am. So here, now I'm in, in front of the camera, behind the camera, but not in the special effects department, but we'll get there. I will realize that dream.
Hey, yeah, of course.
I kind of have realized that dream, and I'll tell you why. If you give me 1 second, I'll explain. Okay.
Yeah,
give me 1
of
second.
course.
Okay. So, like I said, I was really into horror films and creature effects and monster makeup and all that stuff. And the third movie I directed is called Exploited. It comes out, at least in the States, in March on VOD. And it was a project that already existed that I came in as director, but I got to kind of create and design the killer's mask for the film.
Oh,
and,
no way.
Here you go.
No, so cool.
Here you go. No. Yeah, let's see. I put it there. There you go.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Then you indeed did fulfill your dream.
So I kind of did, I kind of did. So, I think it's like more about, you get precise with what the dream was, and then you kind of find like, oh, well, it may not have been this big, but it did execute itself in this way. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool, man.
and that was also a shameless plug for my new film. So thank you. And I'm sorry.
but what about all the things that, because in the film things don't work out for Ray and Bobby at the end, because they say they want to kill Cindy, and of course they end up getting killed themselves, so things don't work out the way they wanted. Now, of course, thankfully we were never slashed down by a killer, but of course things in our careers don't always go the way we want. And I was wondering, whenever something in your career didn't exactly go the way you wanted, how did you make sure that you kind of turn that disappointment that comes with it into something creative so that you can try to make it the next time?
I think the answer is to just keep going. That's how I deal with it. I don't have any other choice, right? Like, I'm not going to let that disappointment kill me.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I'm without disappointment. I mean, I think that like, unfortunately, the life of an actor and a director is partially a life of disappointment, sometimes daily, and you need to just keep going in order to not succumb to the pains of them. The only way I think I've been able to do that is to like stay curious, stay teachable, and have lots of creative outlets, and have creative outlets that are for me only at the end of the day. Like, I'm not making them for the eyes of an audience. I'm making it to satiate me. Then if I have those things, like, I'm most likely not going to disappoint myself if I tried them, and there you go. So, I try to keep it, you could call me a dilettante. I'm sort of like, master of none, and, versed in many different creative areas. Right.
All right. But it's fascinating because, of course, a lot of people don't know what it actually means to be a filmmaker or an actor, because basically whenever you completed the movie, you are kind of unemployed because you have to try to find the next gig after that. And a lot of people
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah,
how much work you have to put into it in order to make sure that you can keep going as an artist.
that's right. And, I think that if you're an actor, most of your time is spent looking for a job or trying to get a job, and so those are, those can be many, 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 many auditions until you get one part. So, that's a lot of ups and downs. That's a lot of places for disappointment, but
Yeah,
you just got to kind of let go. I think that like learning to release attachment, right, is important, and it's hard to do. I mean,
yeah,
I still deal with that daily, but yeah, I think that's the answer is somewhere in there.
right, right.
Yeah.
And so when Cindy tells Bobby and Ray that they have probably watched too much television, Ray of course says, no, you don't become a killer just by watching TV. You go mad when you don't watch enough TV.
Uh-huh.
And of course, we all know that, of course, movies don't turn you into a killer, but movies do have the power to actually make you change in a way. Of course, a lot of movies are here to entertain you, but a lot of movies are also able to make you change and kind of realize stuff. At least it happened to me. And I was wondering if you do remember like a specific magical movie moment that kind of made you change or realize something important about you or about art.
Mm. Um, I would think that like, well, I think like seeing Cassavetes movies, that sort of like, I was like, wow, like, oh, this is, you can make things like super real and tuned in
Yeah,
and raw. And, that really spoke to me. For sure. So I would say like my first experience is watching Cassavetes films for sure. Were a sort of you know spiritual experience, if you will.
right.
Um, I've watched like everything and anything since I was really young. My dad is an animator and was a music video director when I was a kid, and he used to take me to all kinds of stuff. Every weekend he would take me to the movies. So I saw all kinds of things, and so it's hard to think back that far. I mean, I'm sure like part of me saw Empire Strikes Back in the
Yeah.
theater and was like, oh, this is what I want to do, like I want to be in that world. How can I be in that world? So, that might
Yeah,
be the earliest one,
like your early motivation towards that
Yeah,
direction.
definitely. But I have those moments all the time. I go to an art gallery and see a painting and I'm like so inspired and and
Yeah,
enamored, So yeah.
but would you say you ever get, because what when that line came from Ray, it's watching not enough TV, what I remembered is some friends, I grew up with the same friends and watching movies every day, every weekend. And as soon as we became adults, some of these friends kind of stayed away from these movie nights. And I was wondering what's going on? What's the matter? And they were like, well, I feel like I have seen them all. So like uh, they became a little bit bored of what they
Uh,
once loved because they felt like it has become impossible to make them see something that they feel like they have never seen before. And I have heard from different screenwriters that some are like, no, for me every movie is a new magical trick, and some say they hate to admit that sometimes they are bored by movies just because they have seen so many. And I was
mm.
wondering if you ever deal with that as well, if you ever had a moment where you were kind of a little bit bored by what you love actually.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm still at base. Just if I'm in a theater, I'm hypnotized just by the light on the screen. So
Yeah,
like, so that's enough to keep me stimulated. However, I think that like there's a lot of formulas that especially in the last like 10 years, there's a specific group of films that are right now the most successful business wise, and those movies follow the same formula. And so, yeah, I lose sight of the magic unless everything else is done in a new way, or in a specific way. And this harked back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation about the cliche, flipping the cliche. So like I go to see these superhero movies, and like they're all the same formula, and the third act, like it just becomes more about the technical side for me. Like, oh, like, wow, look at, since last year, how many moving parts they can have in this battle scene in the third act. But I'm not really engrossed in the story anymore, because I know what's going to happen, whether that's conscious or unconscious. So like, I would say, there's that. But then again, like, Doctor Strange, like I thought that was great. And I thought they did, they did lots of new interesting stuff, and they made you think, and
it felt different.
Yeah. So, there's that. But I always appreciate, and I'm always more engaged when I think somebody's taking risks with, and messing around with formulas. I don't like the kind of comfort of knowing what's going to happen. Some people do. I mean, some people do. I was just reading the other day that there's like a psychological equation for people that watch movies, the same movie over and over and over again, as opposed to watching new films, that it's comforting to them to know what's going to happen, and they don't, so, but it's not the same for me, there's,
it's very fascinating, because so very often people kind of refuse to accept the unexpected. For example, if you watch a romantic comedy, like a lot of people, they want that the couple ends up being together at the end. So if the movie ends up with them going separate ways, the audience might go like, this is not what I wanted to see, because they were like, I want them to be together.
Right. Or or like I just saw a movie last night, and the ending is left on a sort of ambiguous note. Right. And so like there's the part of me that's used to the formulas, and wants the answer to be clearly defined at the end. And then there's the other part of me that's like, no, that's awesome, it's up to me to decide. It's like the Thelma and Louise thing, right? It's like the ending of Thelma and Louise, like, you don't know whether they live or die, whether they get away with it or what, and like that's sometimes a hard pill to swallow, but it's but it's kind of great, it's kind of great. So
absolutely. I want to say, as a filmmaker, how do you try to keep your projects unpredictable in a way, not only for people that are new to movies, but also for people that like you and I, that have already seen so many?
I think that, like, for me, that sort of depends like on what the film is, what the genre is. Having a good twist is a good way to do that, in a way, right? Like you're baiting them with like what they think is the same old, and then you're turning it over on them. But I don't know, like I also work as a director for hire, and sometimes when you do that, it's more about, for me, it's more about like, well, how can we make this look differently, rather than how can we change the formula? Does that make sense? I mean, right. So it's like, it can come down to aesthetics, how do we tell this same story, but with a different aesthetic sense?
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your new movie Exploited, which I'm super excited to see, because I am also a huge fan of horror films.
Oh, cool.
And again, a mass killer and campus, and that's like everything that sounds already like something I definitely want to see and
Awesome.
definitely will like. So, and I was wondering, because with Scary Movie, you've collected experience when it comes down to horror comedy, and with House of Wax, you've collected experience with a straight horror film. And I was wondering, how much did both of these experiences help you to get your own horror movie right?
I think, well, here's the thing. I love dramedy. I love horror comedy. I love crime comedy. And I love it because, like, you know, life is like that, right? Life is like terrifying and hilarious all in the same time, all the time. And I think like the funny, scary films that get made, you know, there's something like even scarier about them to me. Like one of my favorites is Return of the Living Dead, which is like, you know, it's sort of, you know, this like got these moments of funny, scary, and it sort of tricks your brain because your brain doesn't know what to do, you know? And, you know, I think as a filmmaker, I lean towards projects like that. But to answer your question, like having watched so many movies and horror films when I was younger, you know, I think that like a lot of the devices are built in to like the mechanics of my brain. So, so, you know, with Exploited, it was more of a, you know, cut and dry horror thriller, you know. So, you know, I'm sort of like whatever the vast library is in my mind, it's, you know, calling upon those things. It's not so hard for me, but technically speaking, yeah, I mean, having the experiences of working on both kinds of horror films, Scary Movie or House of Wax, like, you know, technically speaking, you kind of, you know, some tricks, or you know what you're going to be dealing with in making them.
Right.
You know, like if you're dealing with VFX or you're dealing with this or you're dealing with that, you know. Yeah.
I am like super excited to see that one. Really, I'm looking for it.
Cool.
And that was my last question. But before I wrap up, I would like to tell you like two little stories.
Sure, I'd love to hear them.
The Scary Movie is actually a movie we watched in school. We watched that in school. Yes, and it was so fun because when I changed class, and before that I was in a class, the teacher was like 21 years old, and she was like a horror movie fan herself, and so we were allowed to watch John Carpenter's Vampire in class, and she was like watching the door, making sure that no other teachers come, you know, while we were watching it. But then I changed class, and the new teacher was like very conservative, you know, like very like no. She was even like, no, this is like an important war movie, but this is too much for you guys, even if it was like rated PG-13. But she was like, no. And then, but like before the holiday season, she was like, okay, you know what, I'll let you guys decide what to watch before we enter like the holiday season. And Scary Movie won. And like we were already discussing, and like, okay, we have like only 65 minutes to watch it. So do you believe we reached the scene where, you know, Ray gets killed in the toilet, you know, because that would probably be one of the scenes that would make the teacher go crazy, you know? Right. And like with every new scene, we were just looking at her face and just wondering if she's gonna, you know, turn it off or not. But she allowed to watch it. So
wow,
that was great. Yeah.
That's impressive and kind of awesome, you know?
Yeah. And you know, even better, one of my friends actually watched the movie in religion class, because, you know, the teacher from religion class, he went to the video library and he was like, hey, I would like to make, you know, the guys and girls happy. And I was wondering if you can just rent me a movie that teenagers might be into. And she was like, yeah, of course, Scary Movie, you know.
Amazing.
And, you know, I saw that teacher later on. He was like, he was so shocked. He was like, what, are teenagers really into that and stuff, you know? But he was like, he accepted it, you know, he allowed them to watch it, you know. But it was just like so funny because, you know, watching a horror comedy in religion class isn't rather necessarily the first thing you will think of.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you gotta give something for the sinners, I suppose, you know. Explore the sinful side,
Oh, yeah.
or something, you know, if I'm going to think about it in a theological sense or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of awesome. That's kind of awesome,
I
but
mean,
shocking.
I mean, it shows how truly big this really was when it came out. I mean, it's like, and
Oh
even
yeah,
after, I mean, it's like,
yeah, no, and then you know, it really is amazing because you know here we are 22 years later, and you know the film still has legs, like you know, and you know, contrary to what I was saying earlier, it does seem to captivate the younger audience as well, you know, the like 11, 12, 13-year-old audience still, you know, and maybe that's because it's sort of naughty and like it's, you know, something that you shouldn't be watching at that age and you're watching, but yeah, I mean, you know, it's like it has a whole life on TikTok, like people, you know, there's all these like TikTok things and there's memes and you
yes,
know, people are still super excited and love that film and they want to watch it. So, you know, or discover it for the first time. So it's pretty great, you know,
yeah.
not always the case. I'm super grateful to have been part of something that still exists like that, you know?
Absolutely. And I mean, at the time, it was like the highest grossing R-rated movie. And I mean,
Uh-huh.
the reason why with time other movies surpassed it is only because of inflation, but not because of the amount of viewers. Because
Right.
in Germany, for example, it's different. You don't get the, you know, the dollar numbers, you get the numbers of how many people actually saw it.
Right.
So, but of course, when you give out these numbers, you can no longer report box office records
Yeah.
because when you just take a look at the viewers, it's so different. So
Yes.
and of course inflation is the reason why the box office records are happening.
Yeah. 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 You know, it's sort of the Wild West with streaming numbers and all that stuff nowadays and how things get bootlegged and you know
Oh,
shared and all that stuff. It's really hard to track that stuff, I think, you know, which is again is, you know, it's not
absolutely.
a I think like if you're wanting to get into this business, like it's not a good business. It's super enjoyable and you know satiating and creative, but you know, making movies is not necessarily like gonna make you rich, you know.
Yeah, and,
uh,
and I mean, some people probably say, yeah, I want to be a filmmaker because I want to walk on the red carpet, which will be the completely wrong reason to do it.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think so. And that's a whole other thing, you know, with how sort of society has changed and youth culture and culture, you know. But yeah, I mean, you know, Scary Movie stands the test of time.
Oh, for
Thankfully, you
sure.
know, it's awesome. It's, you know, I travel all over the place and, you know, every time I travel, people are like super excited by that film, you know, and whether it was like an experience they had with the movie 20 years ago, or like, you know, I meet people that just discovered it and are like, oh my God, I love that movie. I just met somebody 2 weeks ago that like was like, oh, I watch that movie like 3 times a week. So,
Oh,
you know,
wow. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, you know, that's their comfort film. Go
And,
figure.
and there are even people that, you know, that you know, as you mentioned, you know, people that discover it right now. I've seen some people saying, oh, I have seen Scary Movie before I've seen Scream 5. Now I
Yeah.
can no longer take Ghostface seriously. It's impossible. Like,
Yes, yes.
change the whole thing.
We did kind of ruin that franchise for some people a little bit. You know, and people like get confused. Like people are always like, "Oh, you're from Scream. I love that movie," you know, and I'm like, "Do you love Scream or do you love Scary Movie?" I'm in Scary Movie,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
So,
David Arquette said something similar, you know, that
yeah,
people go to him and say like, "Hey, Doofy," and he's like, "That's the other one."
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And shout out to Dave Sheridan who's my buddy, and
Oh, yes.
and he's an amazing guy, an amazing talent. So shout
Oh,
out to him.
definitely.
Yeah.
Seriously, John, thank you so much for your time today. Seriously, it
Thank
was such a
you.
huge pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your insightful responses, for your time, for sharing your
Of
stories.
course.
It's so cool. I really.
Oh, dude, thank you so much for having me. I could talk shop all day long, so I appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah.
So great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And be well and be safe and be happy.
You as well. Thank you so much, John. See you.
Peace, brother. Have a good day.